They tell you that 60 days is a milestone, a marker of progress. 2 full months of silence, they say, should feel like a victory, a testament to your own strength and resilience. For me, it just feels like I've been holding my breath for 60 days straight, waiting for an exhale that never comes. The house has settled into a quiet I used to crave, but now it's deafening. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards upstairs. Every tiny sound just amplifies the one person who isn't here to make any sound at all. In the space he left, the noise inside my own head has become a constant companion, a relentless narrator of all my doubts. I was managing, though. I truly believe I was finding a new rhythm in this quiet, a fragile peace. Until today, it happened in the most mundane way, as these things always do. I was finally clearing off the nightstand on his side of the bed, a task I'd been avoiding for weeks. There, under a thin layer of dust, was that old paperback he was reading. I almost just put it in a box, another relic to be stored away. But my fingers brushed against something tucked inside. It was a receipt, faded and soft from time, from that little coffee shop on Elm Street, the one with the worn-out armchairs where we'd spend entire Sunday mornings. On the back, in his familiar, slightly rushed scrawl, was a single line, just a random thought he'd jotted down, something about a book he wanted to find. It wasn't a note for me. It wasn't a secret. It was nothing. And yet, seeing it, it felt like everything. In that instant, the careful dam I had built inside myself didn't just crack. It shattered. All the composure, all the rational self-talk about moving forward and healing, it all just washed away. How can a few words, not even meant for me, undo 2 months of painstaking effort? It was the familiarity of it all, the curve of his G, the way he pressed down too hard with the pen. It was a ghost of a normal moment, a life that was mine just a short time ago. The receipt in my hand felt heavier than a stone, a tangible piece of a past I was trying so hard to convince myself I was ready to leave behind. And I realized the silence wasn't a sign of healing. It was just an absence, a hollow space I had been trying not to look at too closely. And so now, here I am, sitting on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, its screen glowing in the dim light of the afternoon. His name is right there, just a thumbprint away. My heart is pounding, a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. But the fear, it's not what I expected. I'm not afraid of what he might say, or if he'll even answer. I'm not even afraid of the potential for more pain, more rejection. What terrifies me in this moment is what it means if I'm the one to press that button. What does it say about me, about these 60 days of supposed strength, if I am the one to break the silence? Am I just proving that, in the end, I can't actually endure being alone, that my dignity is a fair price to pay for a moment of connection? It's strange how memory works, isn't it? Staring at his name on this cold screen, I'm not thinking about the end. I'm not replaying the arguments or the silences that grew between us. Instead, my mind drifts back to the very beginning, to a dusty corner in a second-hand bookstore. I was reaching for an old novel, and so was he. Our hands brushed, a cliché I would have rolled my eyes at in a movie. But in that moment, it felt quiet, significant. There was no grand romantic spark, no sudden jolt of electricity. It was simpler than that. It was a feeling of immediate and unexpected ease, a sense of recognition that I hadn't even known I was looking for. We ended up talking for an hour right there, between the shelves, about everything and nothing. It wasn't a beginning that shouted, it was one that whispered. Those first few months were built on whispers like that, mostly in that little coffee shop from the receipt. We'd claim the 2 worn-out armchairs by the window and let entire Sunday mornings melt away. I remember the way he listened, truly listened, with a stillness that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He wasn't just waiting for his turn to speak. He was absorbing my words, my pauses, my uncertainties. It was in those quiet conversations, over the scent of roasted coffee and old books, that I let my guard down completely. I showed him the parts of myself I usually kept hidden, the insecurities, the quiet fears, the dreams I was afraid to say out loud. And he never flinched. He just nodded, took a sip of his coffee, and made me feel profoundly and completely seen. That feeling of being seen followed us home. The silence in this house, the one that now feels so heavy and suffocating, used to be our favorite language. We could spend an entire evening in the same room, him reading on his side of the sofa and me on mine, without needing to say a word. It was a comfortable, shared quiet chew, woven together with the soft rustle of turning pages and the gentle rhythm of our breathing. His presence was a low, steady hum beneath the surface of my day, a constant reassurance that I wasn't alone in the universe. He made quiet feel like a sanctuary, not a punishment. How ironic that the very thing that once defined our comfort has now become the source of my deepest anxiety. I miss that shared silence more than I miss the conversations. I remember one particular night. I'd come home from work utterly defeated, the weight of a professional failure pressing down on me so hard I could barely speak. I didn't want to talk about it, to dissect it, to be told it would all be okay. He seemed to understand that instinctively. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just made me a cup of tea, the way I liked it, put a warm blanket over my shoulders, and sat with me on the sofa. He just sat there, his quiet presence a solid anchor in my storm of self-doubt. In that moment, he wasn't trying to fix me or my problems. He was just sharing the weight of it, letting me know I didn't have to carry it by myself. That was his gift, the ability to offer strength without a single word. And maybe that's the real heart of the problem. The reason my thumb is still hovering over his name. The foundation of our life together wasn't built on grand gestures or passionate declarations. It was built on thousands of these small, simple, human moments. The bookstore, the coffee shop, the quiet evenings, the silent comfort. He became my safe harbor, the person who made the world feel less daunting. What I'm mourning isn't just the loss of a partner. It's the loss of that profound sense of safety. And the terrifying question that echoes in this silent house is whether I ever learned how to create that feeling for myself, or if I was just borrowing it from him all along. If I press this button, am I reaching for him, or for a version of myself I'm afraid I can't find on my own? Of course, the memory is selective, isn't it? It paints the past in these warm, soft colors, editing out the harsh lines and the shadows. As I sit here, staring at his name, my mind conveniently skips over the moments when that safety first began to feel conditional. It wasn't one big thing. It was a collection of tiny, almost imperceptible shifts, a joke that landed a little too close to an insecurity I'd shared with him in confidence, a new password on his laptop that he explained away with a casual mention of work policy. Each one was a small paper cut, easy to ignore on its own, but together, they started to bleed. I told myself I was being paranoid, that after years of feeling so secure, I was just inventing problems. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and I was starting to realize it had been growing in the dark for a very long time. It began with comparisons, so subtle I almost didn't notice them at first. He'd mention a colleague at his new job, how sharp and driven she was, and I'd feel a small, cold knot tighten in my stomach. He'd talk about the protagonist of a novel, admiring her fearless spirit, her willingness to upend her life for an adventure. I started to see myself through his eyes, or at least, through what I imagined his eyes were seeing. I was no longer the woman in the bookstore, full of quiet mystery. I was the comfortable, predictable reality. The safe harbor, yes, but perhaps harbors aren't exciting places to stay forever. I started to straighten my clothes a little more, to second-guess my opinions, to try and be a little sharper, a little more adventurous. And with every effort, I felt myself becoming a little less me. I remember one night so clearly. We were at a dinner party with his friends, and I was telling a story about a small mistake I'd made at work. I was making light of it, laughing at myself, and he joined in, but his laughter had an edge to it. "That's her," he said to the table, "always getting herself into these situations." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The table laughed politely, but in that moment, I felt completely exposed, as if he'd pulled back a curtain to reveal a flaw I was trying to hide in plain sight. I felt my face flush, and I just smiled, this brittle, empty smile. Later that night, I told myself I was overreacting, that it was just a harmless joke, but the feeling lingered. It was the first time his presence felt not like an anchor, but like a spotlight. That was when the silence in our home began to change. The comfortable quiet that had once been our sanctuary started to feel heavy, filled with all the things I was too afraid to say out loud. I would watch him reading on the sofa, the same way he always had, but now my mind would race. What was he thinking? Was he comparing me to the woman in his book? Was he bored? The rustle of a turning page would make me jump. His quiet was no longer a shared space of peace. It was his private world, one I was beginning to feel I was no longer a part of. I started to fill the silence with meaningless chatter, asking about his day with a forced brightness I didn't feel, just to avoid the weight of that new, uncertain quiet. The very foundation of our connection had started to feel like quicksand. And that's the truth I've been avoiding for these 60 days, isn't it? The silence I'm so afraid to break now is not just the one that stands between us today. It's the silence I kept for those last couple of years. The silence when I didn't ask why he suddenly needed so much privacy. The silence when I swallowed my hurt instead of telling him his words had cut me deeply. I was so terrified of disturbing that fragile peace, of confirming my own worst fears, that I chose to say nothing at all. I chose to live with the quiet anxiety rather than risk the loud, painful truth. So if I call him, what am I even calling for? Am I seeking a return to that illusion of safety? Or am I finally ready to confront the real reason it all fell apart? Staring at his name, I realize I'm not just deciding whether to call him. I'm deciding which woman I am going to be. Am I the woman who accepts the comfortable, edited version of our story? The bookstore? The coffee shop? The easy quiet? Or am I the woman who finally admits to the paper cuts, the subtle comparisons, the slow and painful erosion of her own self-worth? Breaking the silence feels less like an act of weakness now, and more like an act of reckoning. It's a terrifying thought, that the person I need to face isn't just him, but the version of myself who allowed her own voice to become the quietest sound in the room. Maybe this is about more than just him. Maybe this is about finally finding out if I can speak up for her. My thumb is a millimeter from the screen, close enough to feel the warmth of the glass. There's a war happening inside me, a silent, vicious battle. One part of me, the rational part, the part that has painstakingly built these last 60 days of peace, is screaming. It's presenting evidence. The nights I cried myself to sleep, the slow erosion of my confidence, the feeling of being invisible in my own home. It's reminding me, with cold, hard logic, that a single phone call cannot erase the reasons the silence began in the first place. It's a voice of self-preservation, stern and clear. But then there's another voice, softer, more insidious. It's the voice that remembers the bookstore, the warmth of his hand, the shared Sunday mornings. It's a siren's call, whispering, what if? What if this time is different? And what is that whisper really about? If I am truly honest with myself, it's not just about him. It's about this house, this suffocating quiet that seems to have a physical weight. It's the fear of this silence becoming my permanent reality. At this stage in life, the prospect of starting over feels less like an exciting new chapter and more like an impossibly steep mountain I have to climb alone. The thought of all the quiet nights to come, the dinners for one, the holidays spent navigating the pitying looks of coupled friends, it's a terrifying vista. I fear that in letting him go, I've also let go of my last chance at not being alone. And that fear, that deep, primal fear of loneliness, is powerful enough to make me forget almost anything. It makes me want to choose a familiar pain over an unknown emptiness. It's the sheer exhaustion of it all that paralyzes me. Starting over isn't just about dating apps and awkward first dates. It's about dismantling a life that was built for two and figuring out how to reassemble it for one. It's about untangling my identity from the us we became and trying to remember who I was on my own. It involves relearning my own rhythms, discovering what I actually want to do on a Saturday night, and finding a new sense of safety that doesn't rely on another person's presence. The energy that requires feels monumental, and in this moment of weakness, with his name glowing on my screen, the thought of returning to something known, even if it was flawed and painful, feels so much easier than stepping into that terrifying, empty void of a new beginning. Then the guilt settles in, heavy as a winter coat I can't take off. It's a relentless voice that rewrites our history, pointing a finger directly at me. Did I try hard enough? Was I too sensitive about the jokes? Did I not speak up clearly enough about what I needed? Maybe I was the one who let the comfortable silence curdle into a resentful one. This self-blame is a treacherous comfort, because if I can convince myself that I was at fault, then it means I also have the power to fix it. It creates the dangerous illusion that this one phone call could be an apology, a do-over, a chance to get it right this time. The guilt makes me forget that it takes two people to build a sanctuary, and it also takes two people to let it fall into ruin. This silence I'm so afraid to break. It feels so painfully familiar. It's not just the 60 days of no contact. It's an echo of the silence I kept for those last few years of our relationship. I was silent then to avoid a fight, to keep the fragile peace, to pretend I didn't see the distance growing between us. I am silent now to avoid the pain, to protect my healing heart, to prove to myself that I can stand on my own. But what if it's the same silence, just wearing a different mask? What if my refusal to speak up then, and my refusal to call now, are born from the same place? Fear. Is this strength? Or is it just a habit I can't break? Maybe breaking this 60-day silence is the only way to finally break the one that truly mattered, the one I kept when I was right beside him. A part of me is just so angry at myself for even being here, for letting a faded coffee shop receipt undo months of progress. I'm supposed to be stronger than this. I've read the books. I've talked to my friends. I've done the work. I should be celebrating my resilience, my newfound independence. Instead, I'm sitting on the edge of my bed like a teenager, agonizing over a phone call. It makes the entire 60 days feel like a lie, an illusion of strength that shattered at the first real test. I feel like a fraud. This self-criticism is relentless, telling me that if I press that button, I am failing not just myself, but some unwritten code of conduct for a woman my age who should, by all accounts, know better by now. It's an immense pressure to be okay when I'm clearly not. So this is the battle being waged in the space between my thumb and this glowing screen. It isn't really about him anymore, is it? It's a conflict between the woman I thought I was becoming, strong, self-sufficient, healed, and the woman I fear I've always been, scared, lonely, and willing to accept crumbs of affection just to not be alone. Reason versus need. The past versus the unknown future. Dignity versus connection. Each side has a compelling argument, and I am caught in the crossfire, completely immobilized. The question is no longer just about whether to call him. It's a choice about who I am going to be from this moment forward. Am I the woman who clings to the wreckage of a familiar harbor, or the one who finally turns toward the open, terrifying sea? And then, something inside me shifts. It's not a decision, not a conscious choice, but more like a tectonic plate grinding into a new position deep beneath the surface. The frantic debate between my heart and my head simply stops. The exhaustion of the fight becomes its own kind of clarity. I look at my thumb, hovering over the screen, and I see it for what it is. A desperate attempt to rewind time, to go back to a story I've been telling myself, a story where I might still have some control over the ending. But the truth is, the story is already over. The book is closed, and I am sitting here, trying to will a new chapter into existence by staring at the cover. The pain of this limbo, this agonizing indecision, has finally become greater than any potential pain that could come from a phone call. The silence has to break, but I suddenly realize it might not be the one between him and me. My gaze drifts from the phone back to the small, faded receipt resting on the nightstand, the catalyst for all of this turmoil. I pick it up again, my fingers tracing the soft, worn paper. I look past his familiar handwriting, the curve of his G, and my eyes finally focus on something I hadn't even registered before. The date, printed in faint thermal ink at the top. It wasn't from a nostalgic Sunday morning years ago. The date was from 65 days ago. Just 5 days before he told me he was leaving. 5 days before this 60-day silence even began. In that moment, the entire memory of that coffee shop, the worn armchairs, the shared quiet, it all curdles. It wasn't a memory of our connection. It was a document from the very end of it. He was already gone, and I was just sitting across from him, completely unaware. A coldness begins in my chest and spreads through my limbs. So profound it feels like my blood is turning to ice. The phone in my hand suddenly feels like a foreign object, heavy and useless. The urge to press his name, which had been a physical ache just moments ago, vanishes completely. It's not just gone. It's been annihilated, replaced by the chilling vacuum of this new reality. The man who wrote that note was not the man from the bookstore. He was a stranger performing his final scenes, keeping up the illusion of a life that had already ended in his own mind. All my agonizing, my self-blame, my fear of being weak. It was all based on a false premise. I wasn't mourning the loss of a shared past. I was mourning a past that, in its final days, was mine and mine alone. And with that, the last few years of our life together snap into a brutal, unforgiving focus. The subtle comparisons, the new password, the jokes that felt like spotlights. They weren't just paper cuts. They were signposts. They were clues to a truth I was too afraid to see, a truth he was too cowardly to speak. He didn't just leave. He slowly, meticulously, and silently withdrew. The comfortable quiet of our home hadn't just turned heavy. It had become a cover for his departure. He had been packing his bags emotionally for months, maybe years, and I was so busy trying to keep the peace that I never even noticed. The great tragedy wasn't the final conversation. It was the thousands of silent moments before it, where I was the only one still living in our sanctuary. My thumb, with a steadiness that feels borrowed, moves across the screen and deletes his number. There is no ceremony to it, no rush of anger or triumphant release. There is only a profound and hollow quiet. It's a different silence than the one I've been living in. It's not the silence of absence, of a space waiting to be filled. It is the silence of acceptance, the silence of a truth that has finally been acknowledged. I place the phone face down on the bed and look around the room, at the furniture we chose together, at the life we built, but I'm seeing it with new eyes now. This isn't just the house he left behind. This is the house I must now learn to reclaim as entirely my own. The silence is no longer his. It's mine. It's strange, isn't it? For 60 days, I've been measuring silence, counting it, enduring it, fighting it. I thought the goal was to get to a point where the quiet no longer hurt. But this new silence, it's something else entirely. It's not the absence of his voice. It's the presence of my own future. It doesn't feel loud or empty anymore. It feels spacious. It's a quiet filled not with memories of him, but with the questions I now have for myself. What do I want to hear in this room? What music do I want to play? What thoughts do I want to think? The fear of loneliness hasn't disappeared, not completely, but it has changed shape. It's no longer a terrifying void, but rather an unwritten page. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I am the one holding the pen. I spent so much energy trying to be strong, believing that strength meant resisting the urge to reach back into the past. I saw it as a test of my willpower, a battle of my dignity against my loneliness. I see now that I had it all wrong. Real strength wasn't in the 60 days of holding my breath. It was in the single, quiet exhale of acceptance when I saw that date on the receipt. It was in the calm, steady motion of my thumb as it erased a future that was never truly mine. Strength isn't about building walls to keep the pain out. It's about finally having the courage to look at your wounds, to understand how you got them, and to decide, quietly and for yourself alone, that you deserve to heal. It's not a victory over him. It's a quiet truce with myself. And so the house is still quiet. The nightstand on his side of the bed is still empty. Nothing on the outside has changed, but everything on the inside has. I don't know what tomorrow will look like, or the day after that. The path forward isn't clear, and maybe it doesn't need to be. Perhaps the most important part of any new beginning isn't finding all the answers, but finally letting go of the questions that were keeping you tethered to a past that no longer exists. The question is no longer about whether I can survive this silence. The real question, the one that is just beginning to whisper in this new, spacious quiet, is what I will choose to build here. If you've ever found yourself in a similar quiet, maybe you understand. Maybe this is where the real work begins.